Folks, the May 26th runoff primary is coming up in less than 2 weeks, actually, and there are multiple races on the ballot for both the Republican and Democratic ballots, including the Democratic nomination for Attorney General. Joining us is candidate for the Texas Attorney General's office, looking to succeed incumbent Attorney General Ken Paxton, State Senator Nathan Johnson. Sir, welcome back to East Texas Now. How you doing?
Good to be here again, even if it's virtual.
Even if it's virtual. One day we will meet in person. But let's
We'll be
talk.
out there. I'll be out there soon.
Well, let us know. But in the March 3rd primary, you placed first with about 48% of the vote, while former Galveston Mayor Joe Jaworski came in second with about 26%. Neither of you got the 50% majority needed to avoid a runoff. What are you doing now to appeal to voters who may not have sided with you in March?
I think we're trying to stick with the same message. It just takes a long time to get through. We're in a state of 31 million people. We in these attorney general races don't have quite the coverage that you might get. Are we got sound?
Oh yeah,
No,
we're good.
we can hear you. Keep going.
Oh, okay, very good. So really, I think the effort is just in pure communication. It's not a change in strategy. It's not a change in message. The message is the same, winning elections and performing well in office. But to get to those people takes time, and we're just going a little bit more precise in our targeting because the audience, the voting electorate in the runoff is going to be about a quarter of the size that it was in the March 3rd primary. So it's trying to figure out where people are, meeting them there, but delivering that same message of we can win and we can deliver and do a good job in November.
What is that message you're trying to convey to voters?
I think that it has been a very, very long time since voters had faith in the Attorney General's office. And the message that I'm trying to get across to people is it does not have to be a disappointment. It does not have to be a partisan political theater. It actually can be a job where the Attorney General for the state of Texas is actually for the state of Texas, not a wingnut faction that's trying to consolidate power, but rather somebody who serves independently as the framers of the Texas Constitution intended it, as a check on abuse of power at the political level and at the commercial level. And I think people, irrespective of their political ideology, irrespective of the party with which they identify, I think people are feeling a disconnect from power, disconnect from commercial power, a disconnect from political power. And the Attorney General's office is there to make sure that your rights as a consumer, that your rights as a voter, that your rights as a person are not trampled upon, that your rights as a business are not trampled upon. So the message we're getting across is that we actually can make this office work for you.
Now, your challenger in this runoff, former Galveston Mayor Joe Jaworski, says you have compromised on what he calls MAGA-related policies. Your response?
He's been saying that for a year. I beat him by 22 points on March 3rd. It's a dishonest attack. It's a distortive attack, and voters have soundly rejected it. That's my response to that. I stand firmly by all my votes. I have been a solid member of the legislature. I have stood by Democratic values, but I've also worked with my Republican colleagues to get stuff done because that's what we're supposed to do when we get there. That's my response to that. I'm not talking about what Joe says. I'm talking about what I've done and what I promised to do for people.
Now, affordability is a big topic on voters' minds this election. What can the Attorney General's office do to lower costs for Texans?
You know, it's not obvious, right? You think that the Attorney General's office is just there to defend the state or to prosecute people, but there really are things the Attorney General's office can do to lower costs. It's just on a slower time frame, and often, as we see in so many places in life, things that are implemented over time are really the things that are more effective. So what the Attorney General can do is make competition work in the marketplace. One of the problems that we have in the marketplace is that we have such consolidation of ownership and power that prices have risen while quality has gone down and service has gone down. And it's in the Attorney General's scope of authority to enforce competition laws so that, Texas is a market economy. We all believe in free markets. We know they're efficient. We know they're effective. But if they're not free, if they're dominated by single players, they don't produce the kind of prices that people recognize as fair. So it's a longer term play to make markets work for people, but it's a very serious thing that the Attorney General can do. Secondly, people are getting gouged left and right with fees that under many consumer protection standards that are going unenforced are illegal. So the Attorney General can make sure that you're not preyed upon, that you're not getting gamed and gouged and scammed, and cutting little bits of money out of you here or there, or major scams that clear out your savings. So there are lots of things the Attorney General can do that affect your overall economic picture, but it is not, and I think it's important for anybody running for an office to recognize what the office does not do. It is not a legislative body. It's not going to implement the kinds of policies that people normally talk about when you're talking about affordability. It's much more systemic, which in the long run, I think is the ones that are much more lasting.
But are there any specific things you would do as Attorney General to lower costs?
Specific things I would do is start enforcing antitrust laws and enforce consumer protection laws. I'm not
Any
going to come in here
particular
and
that come to
pretend.
your mind? Any antitrust or consumer protection laws you know you would work to enforce more?
Well, as a legislator, I filed legislation to do away with a lot of the junk fees that landlords are charging. I want to go through the laws and make sure that landlords are not abusing renters. I want to take a look at big tech. It's actually an area where Ken Paxton's office has done some good work. Is big tech manipulating you into subscriptions? Are they manipulating you and enabling other purveyors of products to execute dynamic pricing so that they can charge you a different amount than they can charge me? These are places where the Attorney General can be involved. But no, the Attorney General does not come in there and pass a law and set prices anywhere, or offer rebates or stimulus checks. Those kinds of things people are looking for don't come from the Attorney General's office. And I want to promise what I can deliver, but not what I can't.
You talk about renters there a little bit. Talk to me about your thoughts, on housing in this state, and whether, what the Attorney General's office can do regarding the topic, because housing affordability is a big topic on voters' minds.
It's an area where you're going to have to work in conjunction with the legislature, and I think that's why my experience in the Senate is so important. The Attorney General enforces the laws that the state has. I think there are inadequate laws presently protecting renters, but there are laws on the books. There is consolidation of ownership, mainly. We're talking about antitrust. And I can't go through and lay out an entire lawsuit for you here, but what I can tell you is that there are three pillars of antitrust law that were enacted in the United States in 1890, 1912, 1934, or 44, that look to control in the marketplace and ensure that competition keeps pricing where competition sets pricing. It wouldn't be even responsible of me to identify a particular owner or a particular landlord and say, here's who I'm going to sue on Thursday. But I can tell you that we have very few private owners of multifamily housing in this country. I want to ensure that they're not colluding on pricing. For example, many states have sued multifamily housing over algorithms that they use to essentially share pricing information in a way that would be illegal if you weren't running around and going behind the system and using an algorithm to share it if you were doing it directly. But the effect is the same, that there is shared information at the seller level and an absence of information at the consumer level. Attorney generals around the country have been in litigation over that issue. There have been settlements over that issue. It's an example of where attorneys general can go to work for the benefit of consumers.
Let me ask you about a recent court ruling. The Ten Commandments can now be displayed in Texas public school classrooms after a ruling by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals last month. Your thoughts on the ruling?
Colossally bad ruling, one of the worst rulings in probably half a century. It's staggering how bad it is. It's important to note that the en banc decision, that was all the judges were involved, was 9-8. One vote decided that, and there were many Republican judges who were in the minority in that eight judge decision, throwing out something that I think was patently unconstitutional. The reason I think it's so bad is that the 9-vote majority essentially said, hey, we're going to look at modern laws in terms of how people looked at laws 180 years ago, not even at the founding of the country, but at a specific period of time. It is clearly manipulated to reach a political outcome. It's calculated to serve a political agenda. There are some really intelligent people in that 9-vote majority that wrote what I think is a horrific decision, and they used all their brain power to back what I would call an ideological position. I think it's a rotten decision. I still have hope that the United States Supreme Court, as disappointing as they have been at times, that the United States Supreme Court is going to strike down this patently unconstitutional law.
Will you enforce it?
And as Attorney General, it's just to be very clear, were I presently the Attorney General of the state of Texas, I would not be defending that 10 Commandments law. The position of the state of Texas would not be that that was a constitutional law that the legislature passed.
Let's say the ruling by the Fifth Circuit stays in place in 2027 if you are elected to office. Will you enforce this law?
It's not my job to enforce the law in the sense, no, hang on a second. It's not my job to enforce unconstitutional laws. If my jurisprudential conclusion in my discretion, which the Constitution charges me to use, is that this law is unconstitutional, I will not enforce it. As long as the U.S. Supreme Court has not left that ruling in place, it's not my job to enforce it. If the U.S. Supreme Court, if your next question is, well, what if the U.S. Supreme Court says it's constitutional? Well, then, by definition, it is constitutional. So then it's up to the Attorney General, okay, which laws am I going to spend my resources enforcing? I have to look around at all of the different things that I have to do and decide how to allocate the resources that I have. And that one's just going to have to be in the queue to see how seriously how well the people of Texas are served if I deploy my resources, making sure that there's a poster of the legislature's version of the 10 Commandments in every geometry classroom in Texas. But ultimately, if I'm charged with enforcing the law, I have to take an oath and I have to enforce the law.
But just to be clear, will you or will you not enforce this if the Fifth Circuit ruling, is the only thing that's currently in place if you take office at that time?
No, because we will not have a final ruling on that case. It will be pending before the United States Supreme Court.
Are you certain it's going to go before the Supreme Court?
I'm pretty certain it will be appealed, yes.
Okay. Let's talk about Plyler versus.
And let me hit that fine legal point there, because I don't want to mislead people here. There is a legal principle that, as long as I believe it's unconstitutional, if I think the Fifth Circuit got it wrong, I'm waiting to see a final outcome before I deploy all these resources and start harassing all these schools to do something that has nothing to do with public education over a law that I believe is going to be toppled by the United States Supreme Court.
Let's talk about Plyler versus Doe. This is a decision that the Republican Attorney General candidates say they'd like to see overturned. For some context, that 1980s decision requires schools to provide funding for undocumented students. Where do you stand on Plyler versus Doe?
It's a nice contrast between what we were just talking about, this 10 Commandments law, which has yet to go to the United States Supreme Court, versus Plyler versus Doe, which actually is a product of the United States Supreme Court. It's a 40-some-year-old decision. It's a principle that has been upheld and applied throughout the country for decades. It has served the state of Texas well and is jurisprudentially sound. I believe the case was rightly decided, and that is the law of the land. And as Attorney General, not only do I agree with it, it is the law of the land. And I think that it is a misuse and a misconstruing of the office of Attorney General for example, my potential opponents in the general election, Mays Middleton and Chip Roy, to view the Attorney General's office as some sort of battering ram to go up to the United States Supreme Court and overturn settled law.
Data centers. a big topic here in Texas, particularly here in East Texas. There are a lot of concerns about them. Should they be developed? How would the Attorney General's office, under your leadership, handle data centers? Any lawsuits you think you'd file about them?
Um, this is an area where the Attorney General is not the central player. The central player there is the legislature. There are local governments. The Attorney General is there to enforce laws of competition, to protect individual rights, to protect the rights of our cities, the rights of our state. To the extent that development of data center encroaches on rights or breaks laws, that's within my realm. To the extent that it's making somebody mad or it's putting strain on the electrical grid, I've dealt with that as a senator. I'm dealing with that right now as a senator. But the Attorney General is not there to represent ratepayers before the Public Utility Commission. That's called the Office of Public, the office, it's OPUC. So the Attorney General isn't the right office to be handling the policy question or the technical question, the policy question of do we want data centers here, the policy question of who's going to pay for the infrastructure, the practical question, the technological question of how do we implement this stuff, what are the interconnection demands, how are the costs allocated. Those are things I'm dealing with every day right now as a senator. As Attorney General, I'm concerned with the law, people's rights, and it's just a different set of questions.
But what do you think about data centers, in general?
Oh, I think that they could either be something that's very useful in the state of Texas or really damaging in the state of Texas, depending on how it's managed. They are a threat to our water supply. They are a potential driver of higher electricity prices. They are a potential threat to the grid. They also, if managed appropriately, can use far less water than people are concerned about them using. They also can stabilize electricity on the grid. They can also bring their own power. They can also drive a technological influx of good jobs in this state. It really is all up to us and how we manage it. I am not in favor of any owner of a data center, any manufacturer of a data center coming to this state with an extractive attitude. We're going to take your water, we're going to take your electricity, we're going to make money out of it, and we're going to ship it to our out of state and out of the country shareholders. That's not the attitude I want. My approach to data center owners, if you want to come to Texas and be a good citizen, if you want to help make our grid stronger, help make our economy stronger, you want to make sure that you respect people's rights and the history of our land and our water and our air and our wildlife, we welcome you here. But that's a very serious question for policymakers to be engaging in on a continuing basis as technologically things change in the next 5 to 10 year horizon.
I want to ask you about the Attorney General Office's Child Support Division. Anything you'd like to see changed about the Child Support Division?
I don't have the expertise right now to tell you how we need to revise that. I can tell you that it's not working well, and I can tell you that Ken Paxton has used the resources of this office to do all sorts of things other than the job he's supposed to be doing, including child support. So specifically, I think we need to be putting more of the Attorney General's resources into that very essential function. I also think we need to provide pay raises to people who work in that division because the turnover is exceedingly high. But it's also an area where I think it would be very wise for me to bring in people with a great deal of expertise in that area. I actually know people who've worked in that division in the past. I will be assembling people who have a greater knowledge and understanding of how that works than I have and ensure that the job gets done. And here's why. If you make it a priority, you can do it. It hasn't been a priority. So the most fundamental shift is I'm going to prioritize making that operation work well for Texas families.
If I heard you correctly, you feel the Child Support Division is not working well. In what ways?
People tell me they aren't getting their child support payments, and I hear stories of people who are unable to make their child support payments, who are unable to work with the Attorney General's office. But again, I don't know. I'm not an expert in the child support division of the Attorney General's office. I don't know how every division runs, and I don't have respect for people who pretend that they have magic solutions to things. All I know is the people that I've talked to, and many of them who have had encounters with the Attorney General's office, have reported very slow response times, very dissatisfied overall with the results and the level of service. It's something that we have to pay attention to.
It's sounded like in one of your previous answers, this would be a priority for you, the Child Support Division.
Absolutely. It's one of the central functions of the Attorney General's office. Probably half of the 800 attorneys in the AG's office are actually working in the Child Support Division. We have social workers working in the Child Support Division because you have families that are depending on money that they're not getting. And in some cases, you have individuals who owe child support who are unable to earn the income. How do we get people on their feet so that they can actually meet their obligations? In what ways can we make sure that families that aren't receiving the money are cared for? And then how do we actually incentivize people to make the payments, either whether it is through closer relations with families or more punitive approaches. But I think we can solve problems if we make them a priority. I think it hasn't been a priority. Yes, it would be for me.
If you do not end up winning this runoff, do you plan on endorsing in the Attorney General contest?
I don't think any Democrat on the ticket is asking for the endorsement of another Democrat. It's meaningless in a general election. I will support every Democrat on the ticket. I do not believe that either of the Republican candidates for Attorney General are what the state needs right now. If I'm not the Democratic nominee, I will support the Democratic nominee for this office as well as for other offices.
So would you endorse Mayor Jaworski if he's the
I,
nominee?
I don't I don't think an endorsement is the question.
So you don't think
I'm not, no, I don't know what I'll do on endorsements because I've never done that in a general election. I don't know what it means. So I don't play the endorsement game. I'm going to support people who are on the ticket.
Okay. The May 26th runoff is coming up in less than 2 weeks. Is there anything I did not ask you, Senator Johnson, that you would like to add?
Oh, there's an hour or two we could talk about. Let me add this. I think we're at a moment when people from, again, across the ideological spectrum recognize that our system of laws, our respect for the rule of law, our constitutional foundations are falling apart. We have the executive offices taking power from the legislature. We have the legislatures taking power from the courts. We have the courts colluding with the executive. The independence of the different branches of government that were conceived and woven into our Constitution at a state and federal level are falling apart. Corruption is becoming policy. Nobody, Republican or Democrat, benefits if we abandon our foundations. And I want people to pay attention to the Attorney General's office in particular, because if anybody is pledging to be a lackey for the president, whether it's a Democratic president or a Republican president, if you think your mission is to enable a party to carry out its agenda, then you are ignoring the fundamental charge to the Attorney General's office of this state. You are to act as a check on the abuse of power, private sector and public sector, and I will do that.
Democratic candidate for Texas Attorney General, State Senator Nathan Johnson. Sir, we appreciate you coming on East Texas Now today.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.